morning, Ohio State fans. Welcome back to the 11 Dubcast for Tuesday, October 7th. I'm joined once again to preview this week's upcoming film study coming out of the Ohio State-Minnesota game with our very own Kyle Jones. Mr. Jones, how you doing today?
Good. Enjoying this warm Midwestern October weather, just as we all grew up understanding and knowing and totally feeling not weird at all about having 85 in October. Yeah, it's totally normal and cool, but it's been
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, my freshman year at Ohio State, I was in the dorms before they got renovated on North Campus, and so we didn't have air conditioning. So I remember a lot of hot Septembers, and then October 1st rolled around, and it would get cool real quick. But I heard it's like, mid 80s in Chicago lately. So I'm sure you guys are enjoying the last dying breath of summer up there, as it were, waiting for the leaves to change and whatnot. But it is the start of October. We are now nearly halfway through Ohio State's regular season slate. The team is still undefeated after a 42-3 victory over the Minnesota Golden Gophers this past weekend. We're going to get into another stellar performance from a defense that has conceded a touchdown in just 2 games this year of those 5. But before we get into that, we do want to get a quick shout out into our sponsor at 11 Warriors and the 11 Dubcast this season. That would be First Bank of Central Ohio. From game day to work day, First Bank of Central Ohio is proud to support the business owners that keep Central Ohio thriving. They are locally owned, business focused, and always in your corner. Give them a visit at fbcentralohio.com. So, Mr. Jones, defense has been the lead theme of a lot of film study this week, and it's like I think Lee Corso said it first, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Like things are going good. It was a little bit, I don't want to say suspect. There really wasn't any reason to panic because it was the first drive of the game. But going into the Minnesota game, it was profiled that the Golden Gophers they were more impressive on the defensive side of the ball than they were with their offense. So when they got the ball to start and they drove themselves right into field goal range and became one of the few teams to take a lead on Ohio State this season out of the gate, I'm sure it made people feel a little bit uncomfortable, especially after how a lot of teams, specifically one other team near the top of the Big Ten, had a pretty rocky Saturday themselves. It was probably a little bit disconcerting. But then the defense reminded us of why they've been so good all year, and they didn't give up any points the rest of the game after that drive. So with film study this week, you were going to kind of talk about how Patricia made the adjustments from that first drive and then was able to shut down Minnesota the rest of the game. So I'm curious, what did you notice relative from that early concession in the first drive into what they did to adapt in order to make sure that the night went more smoothly as it ended up playing out?
Yeah, I think you called it out right away. Like, what is Minnesota known for, right? It's known for defense. It's known for running the ball. They've had good backs in the past, for offensive linemen, right? For being the classic Big Ten West, version of the genre, right? Like really living that up and continuing the tradition, even though we don't have the divisions anymore.
North
And
Iowa, if you will.
right, exactly. Like Wisconsin West, you know what I mean? It's like a lot of that vibes from that program and that offense. And I think what we saw instead, when I turned on the tape, like it was a lot of throwing early down, so first down dropbacks, and also quick. Like these are 3-step drops. Like that's not at all what we expect Minnesota to be doing. We expect them to have 2 tight ends and to hand the ball off and pull a guard and do all that fun smash mouth football stuff. And only once you've established the run do you then run a play action pass where you end up throwing a 9-yard out to a tight end, right? Like that's what you expect from Minnesota. And instead we're getting 3-step quick out, quick hook over the middle, all this stuff. And I think that was just, it was good. It was a nice game plan from Minnesota, I think, to kind of attack what Ohio State does, because I think the thing that's important to know about this Patricia defense, it's not that aggressive. Like like I think people think it's this super hyper aggressive. There's all these blitzers and all this stuff happening. Like it's actually not that crazy from like a coverage. They're not running new coverages. They're running cover 3. Like your high school team runs cover 3. Like this is it's not like this is anything like super crazy. They're running cover 2. Like again, this isn't crazy stuff. He's just doing an excellent job of hiding it and disguising it and running things at times that you just don't anticipate. And so credit to Minnesota for having a game plan that was like, great, if you're going to run cover 3 at first down and you're going to drop your corners and your safety out of that, we're just going to throw really quickly to the spaces that they're vacating. And we're going to do it so quick that even though we know we're not going to get any yards after the catch, we're still going to get 5-6 yards. Because I think, depending on how many pops people might have had before the game, right? It was a long day of tailgating for a lot of fans, a lot of celebrating and dancing on James Franklin's grave.
At 11 Dubgate.
Right, at the Dubgate and perhaps elsewhere, right? Like there's a lot of folks that probably don't remember that there weren't any big gains. Like these were little dink and dunk and dink and dunk and dink and dunk. And then the next drive, they showed during the broadcast, which I thought was really telling, like Matt Patricia's staring at an iPad. This is a guy who has had to adjust in the Super Bowl with computer printouts of the opposing team. Like they don't get the iPad in the NFL, right? And so that means he has had to, on the fly, adapt his game plan to what the opposing team is doing. That is, I promise you, far more complex than whatever Minnesota was doing. And whatever Ohio State's probably going to see this entire season, more complex. And he had to do it with black and white computer printouts. Now he gets to have an iPad, watch the all 22 from multiple angles in between the possessions, and he gets a chance to adapt. That's a big difference and a big advantage for someone with that experience, right? I think that was something that they didn't talk about a lot with Wink Martindale in Michigan, and I think a lot of people were surprised at how successful that defense was last year, right? And like that's the kind of thing that when you're coming from the NFL, you have an advantage and learn how to adjust. And I think we saw that because the very next possession, Ohio State just ran press man coverage and blanketed the receivers and said, fine, if you're going to throw quick slants and quick hitches, we're going to have Igbinosun and Matthews and all these guys, Caleb Downs, just blanketing your receiver right at the line and dare you to throw downfield before, Caden Curry and Arvell Reese get in your face. And suddenly it stopped working. Suddenly Minnesota couldn't throw the ball. It wasn't that there was any complicated, crazy fix. It was that they identified what the opposing team was doing and went, cool, we've got an answer. And I think that's the difference now that you can see with a pro-style defensive coordinator is that you build answers into the system and into the game plan. It's not, here's the thing we're going to do, and we're just going to do it to death. It's, we've got an answer. We're going to do this, and that doesn't work, we can do this. And if they do this, then we'll also do that. And like, you have that kind of decision tree built into the game plan. And I think that's as big of a reason as any as why Ohio State's been so good defensively. And Saturday night was perfect proof of it.
Yeah, this isn't going to be a perfect comparison because it's opposite sides of the ball, but in the way that we spoke about how we anticipated Washington to run a lot of man coverage based on the tendency that their defensive coordinator had the previous season at Purdue going into their game against Ohio State. And then it turned out that they mostly ended up playing the opposite of that in terms of a lot of zone coverage. And it took the offense maybe a little bit of time to figure out what the best way to beat that and identify that was going to be. In the same way here, you had maybe anticipating more of the traditional Minnesota identity that you spoke about at the top, and then figuring out what the best way to counter and mitigate that was going to be. So that, that's Ohio State's offense against Washington versus defense against Minnesota. I don't know about two different levels of opponents, but I think Washington's certainly closer to being a ranked team than Minnesota is at this stage.
For sure.
And again, it's opposite sides of the ball, but the point there is more to illustrate that this is a theme with the coaching staff, that it's not just we're going to drill a game plan the whole week and we're going to be SOL if, the opponent ends up coming with something different. The opponents have gone away from what their tendencies have been, and the coaching staff on both sides of the ball has shown an ability to adjust and think on their feet, and the players have shown the versatility and their own ability to adapt on their feet and play maybe outside of their comfort zones to where they can still be successful. It remains to be seen how that will fare out against much more talented opponents than the ones that they've fared against recently. But the fact that they're showing this early in the season that they're comfortable doing that, I think bodes very well for whatever the future has in store for this unit on both sides of the ball. Now, one thing I want to ask you about, because the theme, I mentioned it off the top, it was not a very good weekend for a lot of other teams near the top of the Big Ten, but namely one Penn State and one James Franklin. Now, I dedicated a healthy amount of the show yesterday to talking about this with Chase, because I mean, how could you not, as an Ohio State fan, dance on the grave of your not a rival? More specifically, when that not a rival hires your previous defensive coordinator away that you won a national championship with. Now, there's I yesterday when I talked about this with Chase, his official answer to, are you buying the narrative of did Jim Knowles get some control of the defense wrestled away from him after the results of the first Oregon game last season, was no comment, but yes. So they're not willing to go all the way in, but it seems like a lot of Ohio State fans are willing to buy this theory that Knowles was at least partially responsible for the shortcomings of the defense last year, to the point that he's not entirely responsible for the bounce back that they made, and that power struggle was ultimately part of what led to his departure and going to Penn State. The result over the weekend against UCLA has only added gasoline to that fire. Without going into whether you agree with that narrative or not, I'm strictly curious in, based on what you saw from Knowles last year, and now that we have a nearly half a season worth of games within the Matt Patricia sample, what key differences have you identified, if any, that Ohio State has done this year that maybe weren't getting done with Jim Knowles last year, that might explain why this team has been able to remain not only as good as last year's unit was down the stretch, but maybe perhaps even better, and maybe why Jim Knowles has struggled a little bit of late within the last couple of games at Penn State?
Yeah, I don't think there's one scheme thing. Like, it's not going to be, well, oh, they didn't play the Jack linebacker, and so because of that, or because they don't have Caleb Downs playing in the middle of I mean, granted, if they had Caleb Downs, it would probably help a lot. Don't get me wrong. Uh, I think the thing that I always think about when I've been asked questions like this is you have to look at the staff. And I think we tend to overrate the importance of the play caller on Saturday. Like, a lot of people ask me about like Brian Hartline, and I'm not saying Brian Hartline's not doing a huge role in the offense, but like, to pretend like Brian Hartline is running the offense and Ryan Day is not involved is insane. Like, or that Brian Hartline's the only one doing that. And I think, again, I go back to, like, it's not like Madden where one person calls the plays and like they're the ones in charge of of everything happening, and everybody just follows the orders the way the computer players do, right? Like, the assistants matter. Jim Knowles left Columbus. All the assistants stayed in Columbus. The defense was good in Columbus. The defense stayed really good in Columbus. Like, a lot of that can just be chemistry between the staff members, which, not to get into conspiracy theories, but I always thought that was probably as much of a reason of anything why Knowles' defenses didn't always look the way we expected them to, including in that Oregon game. Speculate at what I'm talking about at your own risk. But, I think that's probably more likely of the scenario, is that, he's a bit of an odd, prickly fella. I don't know him. I'm not going to pretend to know him, but like, the reputation is that he's not the warmest guy. And if you James, look, they've dropped him in and said, work with these guys, and not the players, but the staff, and build cohesion and build chemistry. And ultimately, it took him a few years to build that cohesion and chemistry in Columbus.
There certainly aren't as many photos of Jim Knowles hugging the players as there are of Matt Patricia through 5 games, I would say.
And it's not to say that the players have to love him. I think there's a lot of respect there, certainly by the end of last year. I'm not trying to, say this is all on him either, because I think I have just as many questions about Penn State's offense at this point as I do about their defense, if not more about their offense. Like,
the thumbnail for this show is going to say Jones paints Knowles as cantankerous old man. That's what this is going to be.
Like, I honestly think that they have more issues on the offensive side of the ball than the defense. But at the end of the day, Penn State gave up 42 points to a winless team up until Saturday, right? And so to answer your question, I think this is where you look at the staff. And I think it's a credit, if anything, to Larry Johnson, James Laurinaitis, Matt Carreri, Tim Walton. As much as I've talked about Matt Patricia, because that's the change, right? Is that guy who is designing the game plans. But like he can call the plays, but he needs those guys to get each of the individual players ready, right? It doesn't happen if Larry's not bought in. It doesn't happen if James Laurinaitis isn't working with Sonny and Arvell Reese every day, right? Like that's a huge part of it. And I think like you can't discount the staff chemistry and what matters, because I think we've talked about this before on this, this pod, like the chemistry and culture on that defensive side of the ball is still clearly carrying over from what we saw in the playoff last year, even though the guy that is they're responsible for calling the plays is different. Like, and even a lot of the faces are different, right? There's 8 new starters, but that culture stayed the same. This is not a totally new staff. It's not a totally new coaching, set of assistants. And I don't know. I think it's fun to say like, oh, if only Jim Knowles called more of this, or he played more of that, 4-3-2 defense. Like, no, man, like sometimes it just takes time. Like, and it's about like the personalities in the room. And so I think if anything, Ohio State fans should be grateful that he didn't end up taking anybody else with him, and that Ohio State fans have all of that, all those staff members still sitting in offices in the WAC.
Yeah, I do think that's an understated point relative to his departure, was that although he, he was going to be the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football, regardless of if he stayed at Ohio State or he went to Penn State or maybe even elsewhere. But the fact that there wasn't a big migration of talent with him across the conference, where we've seen similar situations unfold like that in the NIL and transfer portal era of college football, I think was a reflection of the program Ohio State has built, that the players felt comfortable sticking around and being here. I perish the thought if Arvell Reese had left with Jim Knowles to go to Penn State. I'd hate to think of where we'd be. Probably be okay, but I mean but I don't know if we would be in a position where Ohio State has still not allowed an opponent to breach double digits on the scoreboard yet, heading into the 6th game of the season. It remains to be seen if Illinois will do that this coming weekend. I said at September that I wouldn't be surprised if this is the first game where it happens, but as it turns out, Illinois is good, but not, at least not as good as Indiana. So maybe they will, maybe they won't. They are the second team that Ohio State will be playing on the road this year. Maybe they will get in the end zone at least. It sounds that sounds so spoiled to say as an Ohio State fan, that, oh, maybe the other team maybe their offense will actually cross the goal line this weekend. But that is the reality of what we're in, and that is how good this defense has been this year to this point. So it's a wonderful position to be in as a fan. And to the point of what the theme of the show last week was that you made, it is very, very fun watching this defense. It's not just a chore. You're not just waiting for the offense to get back on the field and hoping that they can stymie any sort of bleeding. It's very much shutdown football, and it's done in a very palatable and fun fashion. And it's been a thrill to watch, and I look forward to watching more of it as the season unfolds. I hope Matt Patricia sticks around for as long as he wants to. I can't imagine those NFL calls aren't going to come at some point close to the off season with the way things have gone. And he spent time there before, so it's I can't imagine he's not going to be tempted to be lured back, but he can stick around Columbus as long as he wants to.
I mean, I have a feeling by Thanksgiving his agent's going to have plenty of interested parties from NFL cities. So yeah, I'm with you there. I hope he's able to stick around, because this is a lot of fun to watch. But I would, at least at this juncture, be a little surprised if he's not coaching on Sundays next season.
Yeah, the anti-Chip Kelly, if you will. Anti only in the sense that he's on the other side of the football. But only time will tell. We've still got, hopefully, a little bit over half of a regular season and some more games in the college football playoff with Mr. Patricia. And that means we've got more than a few more film studies to look forward to from Mr. Jones himself. You can catch Film Study this Thursday. I think the one last week dropped a little bit before noon, actually, a little bit earlier than they typically happen.
11:35 Eastern time.
Oh, look at
That's our
that.
launch time.
All right, cool. So a little bit before noon, then going forward, give or take some time, maybe depending on how things shake out. But if you subscribe to the 11 Warriors YouTube channel right now, like, share this video, and hit the bell on the notifications, you'll get Film Study exactly as soon as it drops on Thursday. So we have that to look forward to, in addition to the Ohio State Illinois game this week, and another film study coming out of that game for next week that will hopefully be just as positive as the one that is coming on Thursday, and all the other ones have been so far. Mr. Jones, thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you for tuning into the 11 Dubcast. We will be back tomorrow with Dan Hope to talk Big Ten power rankings, which means we'll probably do another twirl on Penn State's grave. That being said, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care, folks.